Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere slow, quiet, a little smoky in the best possible way. Imagine the comforting snap of kindling, the soft orange of firelight dancing across stone, and the scent of freshly baked bread lingering in the air. That's where we begin. In a world of gods and monsters, betrayal and thunderbolts, we're choosing the warmest corner of Olympus. You're here for surprisingly quiet adventures of Hestia, the goddess who never stole anyone's thunder, literally or figuratively. You might not know her as well as the others. No golden chariots, no dramatic romances, no flashy tridents or lightning bolts. Just a hearth, a fire, a promise of home. But don't get too comfortable yet. This is ancient mythology, and you probably won't survive this if you're expecting a chill weekend in the countryside. We've got divine bureaucracy, fire hazards, and sibling rivalries that could level mountains. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while we're at it, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I'm always curious who else is wide awake with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive not with flash, but a flicker, born from the chaos of early gods, those titan mom-dads with parenting styles straight out of a horror movie. You are Hestia, firstborn daughter of Cronus and Rhea. You're also the first one swallowed whole when your dad, in a moment of peak paranoia, decides to eat his children. We won't dwell too long on that experience. Just know it was dark, cramped, and probably smelled like stomach acid and regret. Eventually, your youngest brother Zeus forces a family-sized vomit session, and you tumble out into daylight, blinking, burned out, and technically older than all your siblings despite spending your formative years in someone's large intestine. But instead of screaming for revenge or diving into a power grab, you do something shocking. You step back. While the Olympian power shuffle begins, Poseidon claiming oceans, Demeter planting seeds, Hera drawing up wedding contracts, you quietly ask the hearth, the center, the place where things burn, but gently. Historians still argue whether Hestia chose obscurity or whether she was sidelined by louder siblings. Either way, you make it work. Your first flame is awkward. You accidentally smoke out a minor temple. A squirrel loses its eyebrows. But with time and a little divine trial and error, you figure out how to control fire not as destruction, but as comfort, not the kind that scorches cities, the kind that boils water for tea. While the rest of the pantheon is busy seducing mortals and smiting enemies, you find satisfaction in lighting lamps, warming bread, and setting the rules for hospitality. You don't chase attention. You make space for it. One temple builds a hearth in your name. Then two. Then hundreds. People begin to understand. Before love, war, travel, or crops, there must be warmth. At the center of every sacred fire, there you are, barefoot, quiet, but very much in charge. Quirky fact? Your temples were often circular, with no roof, so the smoke could rise to the heavens, untrapped. The design was meant to make the flame look like it was breathing, which is pretty poetic, considering you're basically the lungs of Olympus. You don't show up in many myths. No scandals, no curses, no weird animal transformations. But you are everywhere in the margins, tucked into the hearts of temples, in the smoke of every offering. Even the loudest gods stop to honor you, before starting anything important. A ritual, a war, a meal. And this is where your story really begins. Because while the gods bicker over thrones and conquests, you quietly become irreplaceable. In the great palace on Olympus, there's a hearth in the main hall. It's yours. Eternal flame, never goes out, never burns too high. And somehow, despite being literally surrounded by divinity-level drama, you keep it going. Your siblings shout. Thunder rumbles. Somewhere, a nymph turns into a tree. You stoke the fire with a long iron poker and mutter, "Again." You could have taken a throne. You were firstborn. You could have taken power and demanded temples taller than mountains. Instead, you asked the thing everyone else overlooked, the fire in the middle of the room, the part that makes the rest possible. And here's something odd. People trust you, like really trust you. No one ever doubts that Hestia's flame will be there. Historians still argue whether this quiet reliability made you the most powerful of all. Some ancient sources say you were honored first in every sacrifice, even before Zeus. Others claim you were often left out because you didn't make good myth material. After all, who wants to hear about the goddess who stayed home and kept the stove warm? Apparently we do, because here you are, thousands of years later, your flame still lit in more ways than one. And you don't just wait in temples. You're in every firelit kitchen, every summer bonfire, every flickering candle on a birthday cake. You're the scent of something baking, the hush of someone arriving home, the warmth behind closed eyes. You may be the goddess of the hearth, but let's be honest, you're also the goddess of naps, midnight snacks, and the moment when you wrap yourself in a blanket fresh from the dryer and forget the world exists. Oh! And about that first eternal flame, it's still burning. Somewhere deep in a dusty ruin, archaeologists once found remains of a temple dedicated solely to you. Inside, they discovered blackened stones, proof of fire centuries old, and beside it, a broken pot with soot along the rim. No thunderbolts, no golden crowns, just a quiet echo of something that once kept people warm. You smile at that. You may not have stormed the heavens, but you made them livable, and that maybe is its own kind of divine. Morning starts with embers. You're crouched beside a hearth in a small village shrine. Not Olympus today, but a wind-swept coastal town that burns more fish bones and frankincense. It's your favorite kind of place. No golden statues, no altar stacked with goat parts, just a smooth ring of stone, blackened by generations of fire, and a handful of sleepy offerings, a bowl of rice, a curl of dried lavender, and, slightly charred, a piece of honey bread someone clearly forgot was toasting. You breathe softly. The flame stirs. Another day begins. Because you don't just sit on Olympus waiting for holidays. You roam, quietly, invisibly, in every place where humans gather for warmth. You're there. And this morning, like thousands of mornings before, you make your rounds. In Athens, a new bride lights her first hearth flame, borrowing coals from her mother's fire. It's more than tradition. It's an act of connection, flame to flame, woman to woman. That borrowed ember is considered sacred. A little kiss of you nestled in every kindled spark. In Sparta, the fire goes out. A kitchen boy, panicked, tries to relight it with damp kindling and too much enthusiasm. The smoke chokes. You sigh, step in, and guide the flame of the breeze no one feels. It flares to life. He falls back, coughing but triumphant. In Delphi, the oracle's attendants prepare the sacred hearth for yet another round of prophetic steam baths. You leave them to it. That place always smells like sulfur and existential dread. You prefer kitchens. Mainstream historical fact. In ancient Greek households, the hearth wasn't just for cooking. It was a spiritual center. Families made daily offerings there, often with the first bite or sip of any meal. Even those were sworn by the hearth, believed to bind more tightly than any written word. It's hard to explain your presence to the others. The louder gods don't get it. Hermes, for instance, once asked, "But don't you ever get bored?" As if quiet was something you endured, not chose. You smiled, then offered him tea. He drank it too fast and burned his tongue. You didn't say, "I told you so," but the look on your face did. Even among immortals, your role feels like a whisper in a thunderstorm. Poseidon builds ships from salt and pride. Ares counts corpses. You notice when someone adds an extra blanket to their child's bed. You are not the goddess of epic wars or star-crossed lovers. You're the goddess of small things, of what's stacked just so, of the last ember that refuses to die, of someone waiting up with a warm bowl of soup. Quirky tidbit. Some rural towns believe that if a hearth fire ever went out completely, the whole family's luck would drain away with the smoke. So they assign one child the job of Ember Watcher, basically an ancient fire babysitter. Some kids loved the power. Others used it to negotiate better snacks. You once had a temple where the flame was so revered, a priestess accidentally coughed too hard near it and apologized to you for sneezing. You didn't hold it against her, but she did develop an oddly reverent relationship with ash afterward. Back on Olympus, the day unfolds without drama, which is rare. Aphrodite is busy tweaking the colors of autumn, and Artemis is off threatening poachers with extremely poetic threats involving silver arrows and eternal regret. You tend the palace hearth, one of the few gods who still does their own divine maintenance. You stir the coals with the iron poker Zeus had specially forged for you, though you suspect it was just to stop you from stealing his lightning rod for firewood again. Once was enough. You prepare lunch. Not for yourself, obviously. You're a goddess, and hunger is optional, but for the messenger girls who run scrolls between chambers. You like the way their eyes widen when they find warm bread and honeyed figs waiting. They don't know it's from you. They assume it's Hera trying to bribe loyalty. You don't correct them. Historians still argue whether the hearth rituals were originally religious or just practical. Did people really believe the flame was divine, or were they just trying to stay warm? But you know the truth. It was always both, because a home is more than walls. It's where the fire lives, where you live. At dusk, you settle in a mortal home, watching to the hearth smoke as a family gathers for dinner. The parents bicker over lentils. A toddler throws olives like confetti. Someone says grace with half a mouthful of bread. You press a warm hand to the stone, and the flame leans toward you. This is your worship. Not incense, not chanting, just togetherness. Later that night, you drift through a city alley where a young man is lighting a tiny clay lamp for his sister's wedding. It's a family tradition, passed down without knowing you're behind it. But you always are. You touch the wick and the flame catches. His face softens. You don't need praise, just that look. And then, because you're still a goddess and balance is important, You casually nudge a tavern fire where two drunk philosophers are arguing about whether fire is a symbol of desire or knowledge. The flame flares, one of them yelps, and they both spill their wine. Debate over. You snort softly. Not all sacred work is serious, and not all gods need to shout. You wake in a forest hut that smells like pine resin and burnt oats. Okay, maybe wake is the wrong word. You don't exactly sleep the way mortals do, but there's a certain kind of dawn light that feels like a gentle nudge, and today it filters through the lattice roof just right, kissing your cheeks with warmth. You stretch, your bones not needing it, but your spirit enjoying the gesture. You're here to check on an old woman who tends a public hearth at the edge of a mountain village. She's one of your favorites. Sharp-tongued, wrinkled like sun-dried figs. Hasn't missed a morning fire offering in 60 years, even though her knees now creak like a worn-out lyre. You find her crouched beside the hearth, muttering to the flame like it owes her rent. "Don't think I didn't see you flicker last night," she scolds, tossing in a handful of dried mint. The coals hiss like a cat in a bad mood. You burn steady or you burn nowhere. You smile. She's not talking to you directly. But let's be honest, she kind of is. Mainstream historical fact. In many ancient Greek villages, there was a communal hearth near the agora marketplace where travelers could warm themselves and make quick offerings. It was kept burning around the clock and watched over by designated women, usually widows or elder priestesses, who were seen as especially close to Hestia. The old woman's dog thumps its tail against the floor when it sees you. Not because it sees you exactly, but because animals are good at sensing things gods don't bother explaining. Like energy, presence, the way the air smells different when you're nearby. You squat beside the old woman and lean into the warmth. "Good job, by the way," you whisper. "That mint trick? Solid choice." A breeze lifts the edge of her shawl. She takes it as confirmation and nods like she invented fire herself. Your temple in this village burned down 2 decades ago. Not from neglect, but lightning. Zeus got a little overexcited during a particularly dramatic breakup storm. Still, the villagers never rebuilt it. Instead, they just kept the public hearth clean. That's enough for you. Most gods would be insulted. You felt relieved. You've always preferred a stone circle to marble columns. Historians still argue whether hearth goddesses were ever meant to have temples at all. Some say they were too domestic for grandeur. Others claim your earliest shrines were simply lost to time, quiet places that never made it into flashy scrolls or poetic epics. You suspect both are true, and neither matters. The fire knows. By midday, you slip into a noble household in Corinth. The servants are bustling. Lunch smells like roasted figs and cracked wheat, and the lady of the house is scolding her daughter for using the family brazier to melt wax for love spells. "Do you want the gods thinking we boil our intentions in cooking pots?" she hisses. The daughter shrugs. "Worked last time." You resist the urge to high-five her. Instead, you nudge the mother's elbow just enough to spill a pinch of salt into the fire. The flame crackles. She freezes. Her eyes narrow. "Fine," she mutters, "but next time use a ceremonial brazier." That's diplomacy. Hearth style. Later, in a fisherman's shack by the Ionian Sea, a boy lights a tiny oil lamp in memory of his grandmother. You guide his hands when they shake. You steady the wick when it droops. When the flame catches, He lets out a breath like he's been holding it for a week. You don't say anything, but you stay until he sleeps. Quirky tidbit. Some households believe that tossing a bit of garlic skin into the fire could ward off gossip. No one knows where that started, but the smell alone would make even Apollo stop talking. By nightfall, you visit a vineyard estate where the workers are singing and stomping grapes under lanterns. The hearth here is an open pit near the barn, ringed with fire-painted stones. There's wine, music, laughter, and somewhere in the corner, a man playing a lyre with one string too loose. You don't do much. Just tilt a breeze toward the fire, so the smoke doesn't choke the dancers. They never notice, but one girl twirls closer to the flame and laughs louder. That's enough. Sometimes mortals leave you out offerings. A doll, a cracked ring, a lock of hair knotted with lavender thread. You accept them all, not because you need them, but because giving is how humans make meaning. Your hearth is where they place the parts of themselves they don't know what to do with. You once received a pebble shaped like a foot. You still don't know why, but you keep it. At the edge of Thebes in a courtyard kitchen, two boys argue over who gets to poke the fire. Their grandmother finally throws both sticks into the hearth and declares herself Queen of Flames. You crown her with the faint shimmer of golden light. Her back straightens. She won't know why her joints ache less tomorrow, but she'll hum while sweeping. Back on Olympus, the other gods are debating a mortal war. Again, you skip it. There's nothing helpful you can say that won't be ignored, then paraphrased by Athena later with more dramatic flair. Instead, you check on the palace kitchen. Someone forgot to bank the bread oven. You coax the coals back to life with a slow swirl of your fingers. The flour-dusted cook returns just in time to see the flame reignite. She gasps, clasps her hands, and whispers, "Thank you, Hestia." You whisper back, "You're welcome." The bread rises perfectly. You feel oddly smug. The night ends with you resting by a campfire built by shepherds on Mount Pelion. One is plucking at a stringed instrument with the enthusiasm of someone who's never been formally introduced to rhythm. The others groan. You nudge a pine cone into the flame. It pops. The off-key musician takes the hint. Silence settles. The fire glows. You stretch content. You're everywhere tonight, in the crackle of embers and the sigh of smoke. In laughter, grief, routine, and ritual. Not every god needs thunder. Sometimes warmth is enough. You start the morning perched, literally, on the edge of a chimney in a modest house just outside Delphi. Not glamorous, not scenic, definitely soot-covered. But there's something about this home's energy that pulls you in like a soft tug on your sleeve. Inside, a young woman stirs porridge over a clay brazier, her infant strapped to her back with a wine-stained shawl. Her eyes are rimmed red, crying or sleeplessness, you're not sure. Probably both. She mutters, "Just stay lit just today," as the fire flickers weakly. So you stay. A flick of intention, a breathless whisper of presence, and the flame steadies. Not brighter, just calmer, like you nudged it into remembering what it's supposed to do. She doesn't see you, but she exhales with her whole body and stirs with new rhythm. Mainstream historical fact. In many ancient households, women were solely responsible for tending the hearth fire, not just for warmth and food, but also for spiritual continuity. If the fire went out, it was seen as a bad omen, and relighting it often required ritual purification. You watch her tip a spoonful of hot porridge onto the floor as a first offering. Old habit, taught by her grandmother. She doesn't say your name, but the gesture is enough. You accept it, of course. Even gods have taste buds, and yours lean nostalgic. Later, you trail behind a group of travelers moving down a goat path through dusty hills. They're sweaty, sunburned, and hauling more wine than wisdom. But at nightfall, they gather around a shaky fire built with damp twigs and overconfidence. Maybe Hestia will bless it. One jokes, chucking a scrap of bread crust into the flames. You do. The fire catches strong and true. They don't know how or why, but one raises a cup anyway, to the gods who don't ask for much. You smile. That one might be your new favorite. Quirky tidbit. Some traveling merchants used to carry tiny hearthstones from their home fires, believing it kept their family's protection with them. These stones were sometimes kissed before bed or tucked under pillows in unfamiliar inns. You always felt that was incredibly sweet and mildly flammable. By midday, you drift Athens. You always linger a bit longer here. The city's pulse is fast, caffeinated by civic pride and marketplace drama. But behind the noise, you find a courtyard where a group of school children cluster around a brazier, each taking turns feeding olive pits. A teacher stands by, explaining how even discarded scraps can fuel warmth. Fire doesn't judge, she says, only receives. You could not have said it better. Historians still argue whether Hestia had formal temple rites in city centers like Athena or Hera. Some sources suggest she was present only as flame. No statue, no procession, just flickering devotion tucked into corners of other gods' grandeur. You've always found that fitting. You were never interested in being the headline act. You're more like the candle at the end of the table. Easy to overlook until it goes out. In a townhouse near the Acropolis, a couple is arguing over dinner plans. You don't intervene. That's not your lane. But when the man threatens to let the hearth burn out in protest, you quietly reignite it behind his back. The wife sees it, narrows her eyes, and says, "Hestia is watching." He blinks, nods. "Right. Sorry." That's your PR strategy. Subtle guilt and sudden fire. By dusk, you're in a poorer quarter, seated cross-legged by a shared outdoor fire pit used by 3 neighboring families. Tonight they're roasting onions and telling ghost stories. One child insists you once chased a thief with a flaming ladle. The others gasp, wide-eyed. You don't correct him. You've done stranger things. A woman nearby weaves a garland of bay leaves and hangs it above the hearth. Not for beauty, for thanks. You accept it. You always do. Back on Mount Olympus, you pass Dionysus in the hall. He smells like regret and spilled honey, and he's humming a song that doesn't have verses, just escalating chaos. You should come to the banquet later, he says, offering a wink and a fistful of raisins. Hard pass, you murmur. He shrugs. Suit yourself. Missing good one. Sappho's reciting poetry drunk again. You're tempted, but no, your place isn't among goblets and gold this evening. It's in a 2-room home in Thessaly, where a woman just lost her husband and hasn't lit the hearth since. You drift in quietly. She's sitting on the floor in her night robe, staring at cold ash. She doesn't speak, just breathes. And you, gently, gradually, coax the coals back to life. They don't roar. They whisper, and that's enough. The orange light touches her knees. She watches it like someone seeing a heartbeat for the first time in days. Her shoulders soften. She reaches out, adds a twig. Fire is not always loud. It just has to be alive. You start the next day not in a temple or a home, but in a ship's galley. It's a creaky, pine tar-scented merchant vessel off the coast of Lesbos, and the cook is cursing in 3 dialects because the wind won't stop blowing ash into his stew. He swats at it with a ladle like he's fighting a sea spirit, which, to be fair, he might be. You sit quietly beside the small brazier bolted to the floor, watching the chaos with mild amusement. This fire is humble, barely more than embers under a crusty grate, but it's been burning for 6 days straight. You help once or twice, nudge a few sparks back when the ship tilted too sharply. The cook thinks he's just lucky. You're fine with that. Mainstream historical fact. Ancient Greek ships often carried a small, protected hearth or brazier for cooking and rituals. Fire aboard was both vital and dangerous, so it had to be watched carefully, especially on longer voyages. Sometimes a bit of sacred flame from the home hearth was brought aboard for protection. You trail a finger along the rim of the pot. The stew bubbles obediently. The cook blinks, mutters, "About time," and tosses in another handful of leeks. You like shipboard fires. They're stubborn. They understand movement. By afternoon, you're in a crowded tenement in Corinth where 4 families share a central hearth. The youngest child is trying to toast a barley cake, while her older brother keeps stealing uncooked pieces to feed the pigeons. She yells. He denies. The pigeons win. You smile and keep the flame low, warm enough to cook, not hot enough to scorch. She deserves at least 1 unburnt breakfast. Later, a priest in a back alley shrine lights a candle in your name. He's not your priest. The temple is dedicated to Hermes. But he says, thanks for the warmth last winter, and places a tiny dish of honey beside the wick. You dip your finger in. Divine sugar rush. Totally worth the detour. Quirky tidbit. In some villages, people used to whisper jokes into the hearth smoke, believing that Hestia enjoyed humor and would laugh the cold out of the walls. You've collected centuries of terrible puns and kitchen gossip this way. Your current favorite? Why don't centaurs use fireplaces? Because they prefer to hoof it. You appear next in a bakery. It's your 3rd favorite place in the world, behind quiet kitchens and those beach bonfires where no one talks unless it's to compliment the fish. This bakery's oven is shaped like a beehive, and the baker sings off-key while brushing loaves with olive oil. You like her immediately. She's tired, underpaid, and once threw a mouse out her flour sack with the fury of an offended war goddess. Today, she's making honey twists. You sit by the oven, your presence encouraging a steady, even heat. Each batch emerges golden and slightly glossy, and the baker nods with satisfaction, like a general surveying a battlefield one. Thanks, venerable one, she says quietly. Didn't have it in me today. You don't answer. Just warm the oven 1 extra minute. Enough for the crust to crackle with perfection. Historians still argue whether Hestia had formal festivals of her own or was simply honored at the start and end of others' rites. There's evidence of offerings to you before meals, after feasts, during odes, but never a grand parade or raucous celebration. You've always been the comma, not the exclamation mark, and you prefer it that way. Evening brings you to and along the Euboean coast. Dusty travelers crowd around the fire pit, rubbing sore feet and poking sausages onto skewers. A storyteller is midway through a tale about a satyr who got drunk and married a beehive. It's deeply inaccurate, and absolutely hilarious. You sit just behind the flames, letting their warmth draw the group inward. This is your hearth. 2. Not just the literal flames, but the laughter and weary sighs, the way strangers relax when warmth finds their bones. These moments matter as much as prayers. A child falls asleep with his head in his mother's lap, face smudged with ash and joy. You tuck the fire inward slightly, dimming it to lullaby mode. Back in the mountains, a hunter kneels alone in front of a half-buried hearthstone, rubbing it with oil and murmuring thanks. You were with him last winter when the avalanche nearly got him. He doesn't remember the soft heat that thawed his hands just enough to move, but his gratitude sticks. You always hear it, even if no one else does. You finish the night at a noble estate. The servants are cleaning up after a feast. The guests are long gone. The couches are wine-stained, and the fire is down to sleepy orange glows. A young maid wraps her shawl tighter and sweeps around the hearth with slow strokes. You follow her, silent. When she pauses, you flicker the flame just slightly, enough to make her glance up. She smiles, not because she saw you, but because she felt not alone. That's your power. You're the warmth between words, the pause in a storm, the breath before a story begins. Not loud, not flashy, but always there. By sunrise, you're already busy again. You've slipped into a farmhouse tucked between terrace hills. It smells like barley, goat hair, and that particular kind of sleep only farmers know. The bone-deep kind earned by wrestling vines and hauling water. The family inside is just stirring. You drift to the kitchen corner where a hearth squats like a faithful dog, blackened and cracked from decades of work. A copper pot hangs crookedly above smoldering coals, filled with yesterday's lentils and hope. A child thumps in with bare feet, dragging a stool, and begins poking the ashes with a stick twice her height. She doesn't say anything, just pokes, and waits. You respond with a soft glow, warming the pot and her toes. She grins like she started the sun. Mainstream historical fact. In rural Greece, especially during the classical period, the hearth was both kitchen and altar. Sacrifices to Hestia weren't elaborate, just a splash of oil, a pinch of grain, but they happened daily, as constant as breath. Your worship was simple, woven into routines rather than reserved for grand displays. By late morning, the house is alive with motion. Cheese wrapped in fig leaves is loaded into baskets. Laundry slaps against river stones. And a grandmother mutters something about too much salt in the dreams last night. You spend most of the morning maintaining that flicker of calm amid the bustle. You settle into the space between sighs, the hush under laughter, the hum that hold the house upright. But by noon, you're gone again. This time, you're in a city bathhouse. Steam hangs thick as sheep's wool in the air, and your presence here is subtle. Less about flame, more about warmth. You're in the heated floors, and the stones that sweat beneath bare feet. Patrons come in cold, and leave pink and pliant, hair damp and muscles stretched. One old woman lounges with her ankles crossed, dunking a sponge in hot water and lecturing the air about her nephew's failed love life. You chuckle. She's completely unaware she's soaking in a minor miracle of thermal engineering. The bathhouse hearth, cleverly built beneath the water reservoirs, was modeled after temple stoves. Another quiet nod to you, even when not seen, you're felt. By mid-afternoon, you're trailing along a road with a merchant caravan. The sun is relentless, and the travelers are dust-covered and cranky. You flicker gently in a small clay stove on the supply wagon, keeping water hot for tea and morale. The youngest assistant lights a tiny taper to boil chickpeas and whispers, "Please don't explode." You don't. Instead, you steady the fire and guide the smoke so it doesn't sting his eyes. He smiles. You're his favorite goddess now, even if he never learns your name. Quirky tidbit. Some traveling merchants carry tiny hearth charms, little clay medallions or carved stones believed to carry a sliver of Hestia's warmth. These were placed near fires to ensure steady flames and safe cooking. Archaeologists once found a charred one in a ruined cart, still faintly marked with your spiral symbol. Later, you're called to a tragedy. A home fire, accidental, cruel, and fast. A wind-snapped shutter, a curtain too close, and a family left huddling outside with nothing but smoke in their hair and soot on their faces. You arrive with the embers still sighing. You can't undo the damage. That's never been your domain. But you kneel beside the blackened stones, gather one warm coal, and whisper it back to life. The smallest flame, tiny, fragile, defiant, dances in the palm of a survivor's hand. It's enough to start over. Historians still argue whether Hestia had a role in rebuilding after disasters, or if your presence was purely domestic. But survivors often reported feeling a strange warmth even when nothing was burning. A reassurance that home could be rebuilt, that comfort wasn't gone forever. That warmth, it's you. Evening brings you to a stonemason's hut. The man is gray-bearded, silent, and methodical. He lights a fire each night, not to cook, but to stare into. It's his ritual. He chips stone by day and watches fire by night. He believes it balances him. You settle into his hearth without question. The stones whisper things to you, layers of heat and sediment, secrets buried before cities were born. You listen. You answer. One coal shifts. A crack forms in a log just so, and suddenly the mason sees a new design in his mind's eye. A curve of marble for a temple step, or the arch of a gate never built before. You don't sculpt the stone, but you help shape the dream. At night, you're called again, this time by a widow lighting a lamp. She does this every evening, placing on the windowsill and murmuring your name. Hestia, come warm my memories. Her house is silent, but not lonely. You've been here since her husband passed, since her children moved on. You warm the stew she eats in small bites. You steady the table leg that always wobbled. You keep the shadows friendly. She doesn't ask for much, only presence. You're very, very good at that. You close the day under a fig tree behind a tavern. The cook there keeps a hidden brazier going, fed with olive pits and day-old bread crusts. He says the flames talk to him. He's half right. You whisper back sometimes, usually sarcastic commentary on his flavor choices. But tonight he's quiet, just feeding the fire and humming a lullaby his mother sang when the war drums were too close to sleep through. You hum with him. The sky darkens, the fire sighs, and once again you're everywhere and nowhere. Before dawn breaks, you're already moving. Not because someone summoned you. No incense, no prayers, no clanging bronze. You move because the world stirs, and you are part of that first breath of day. You settle into a quiet corner of a weaving workshop, where three sisters, one sharp-eyed, one sleep-deprived, and one always humming, are tying thread onto a massive loom. Their hearth isn't grand. It's little more than a fire pit, with a soot-smudged pot perched on iron legs. But it's warm. It smells like barley porridge and lemon balm. You curl into the flames, stretching just enough heat to warm their calloused hands and the bone-thin cat curled on a blanket nearby. As the threads tighten and pass beneath fingers, you're reminded that home isn't always still. Sometimes it pulses with the rhythm of hands, making something from nothing. Mainstream historical fact. In ancient Greece, household weaving was a daily ritual, and hearths were central to these workrooms. Women often sang hymns to Hestia as they wove, gentle songs meant to steady fingers and soften sorrow. A few scraps of these hymns survive today, tucked into pottery shards and frayed papyrus. You stay with the sisters until the oldest sighs, sets down her shuttle, and declares the morning officially ridiculous. You agree. Time to move. Now you're in a coastal village, inside a fisherman's cottage that smells like salt, mildew, and old rope. The fire's already burning when you arrive, a squat blaze under a dented kettle. The wife is packing food into jars, olives, anchovies, some mysterious pickled root that might be medicinal or might be vengeance in a brine. The fisherman is pulling on boots. His face is a road map of weather and worry. He leans over to kiss his wife, but not before tossing a pinch of flour into the fire, a nod to you. For luck, he mutters. It's not much, but you feel it. And so, you bless the kettle with steady heat and the man with a silent wish. Calm seas and full nets. The wind howls outside like a petulant godlet, but you tuck warmth into man's coat before he walks out. You are invisible but never absent. Your next stop is peculiar, a temple of another god. You don't mind. Temples are homes of a different kind. This one belongs to Athena. Clean lines, olive wood incense, the sharp tang of marble dust in the air. But tucked in a side chamber, there's a hearth. Small, mostly decorative, but still sacred. A young acolyte is there, sweeping ash from the brazier. She lights it not out of obligation, but affection. She says your name under her breath, like a secret kept between sisters. Quirky tidbit. Though Hestia had few formal temples of her own, nearly every shrine or sanctuary, no matter deity, kept a small hearth in her honor. She was a guest who always had a seat at the divine table, even if no one wrote poems about her hair. The acolyte stirs the coals. You respond with a warm glow. She smiles, touches her necklace for no reason at all, and whispers something she hopes no one else hears. You hear it. You keep it. You arrive next in a wine merchant cellar. It's not glamorous. Damp walls, stacked amphorae labeled in charcoal and crossed fingers. But a fire pit crackles near the ledger table, warming the quills and the barrel-tapping knife. The merchant, a man with more debts than eyebrows, waves his hand in your direction as if brushing off dust. He knows you're here. He just doesn't want to be sentimental about it. He's balancing books while his apprentice drops cloves into mulled wine. The fire bubbles the surface gently, releasing steam that smells like cinnamon and aging ambition. You stabilize the flame. It's temperamental today, like it knows the books might not balance. Historians still argue whether hearth worship was more about faith or control, a way to create order in chaotic homes. Some scholars suggest the rituals offered people a sense of predictability, a divine constant in an unpredictable world. Others argue it was simply comfort wrapped in religion. Whatever the motive, the merchant exhales when the wine simmers just right. You did that. That night you're pulled yanked almost into a roadside inn. It's chaos. A donkey's braying somewhere it shouldn't be. A child is crying. Two travelers are arguing over whose turn it is to sleep closest to the hearth. You slide into flames like a referee who's already tired of everyone's nonsense. One of the travelers throws in a handful of dried herbs and mutters a traveler's blessing. You glow a little brighter. It quiets them. A lute player tunes her instrument near the wall. The innkeeper ladles soup into bowls that will never match. The baby finally hiccups into silence. It's messy. It's loud. It's still home. You stay longer than usual, just until the bickering turns into snoring, and the donkey stops threatening structural collapse. Later, you're in a tower library. A candle burns beside a student's elbow as he copies medical texts into a scroll. He doesn't even glance at the hearth. It's mostly embers anyway, but he mutters, "Keep the light steady, please." You oblige. He's not your usual worshiper. Too distracted. Too ambitious. But he said, "Please." And sometimes that's enough. You shift the logs. Steady the light. Let the shadows dance like they're memorizing formulas. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hoots. Your flame flickers in rhythm with the boy's heartbeat. He doesn't notice. You do. By the time the sun crawls back behind the hills, you've already visited 4 kitchens, 1 roadside blacksmith, and a surprisingly cozy goat shed with excellent insulation, and a goat who might be plotting world domination. But now, as the morning stretches into gold, you find yourself at a villa on the edge of a mountain slope. The family here is old money. Marble columns, imported figs, a mosaic of Poseidon in the bathing room that honestly overdoes it. But even here, where everything smells like lavender soap and distant condescension, the hearth holds court. It sits in a sunken room, surrounded by plush cushions and a table laid out for breakfast. Flatbread honey, something that looks like candied fennel. The lady of the house enters, trailing a robe dyed the color of crushed pomegranate. Her husband follows, beard perfectly combed, sandals unnecessarily gold. But it's their daughter who stops beside the fire. She adjusts a log with bronze poker, then throws in a twist of herbs wrapped in cloth. "For Hestia," she says quietly. You nod, even if she can't see you. Mainstream historical fact. Wealthy Roman and Hellenistic households often maintained private hearth altars within their homes, where they offered herbs, wine, or salt in honor of Hestia or her Roman counterpart Vesta. It wasn't just a tradition, it was insurance, the divine equivalent of locking your doors and double knotting your sandals. A servant refills the water basin. A boy yawns and drops a figure. The dog eats it with great ceremony. Everything hums with comfort. You breathe warmth into the moment, like sealing wax over something sacred. Later, you're in a cramped apartment above a cobbler's stall in the city's poorer district. The hearth here is humble. A soot-stained hole in the wall with a single iron pan perched on a crooked stand. A widow lives here, sharp-boned, hair streaked with gray, always muttering to her chickens like they're old friends with gambling debts. She doesn't notice your arrival. She's busy boiling onion skins for dye. But when the kettle hisses, she murmurs, "Easy, child. Don't get uppity," and throws in a sliver of dried pear with a reverence most people reserve for funerals. You wrap heat around her ankles, where the chill creeps worst. She sighs and adjusts her shawl. You've never needed temples. You've always lived here, in places like this, where warmth means survival. where a shared bowl of soup is a sacrament, where the hearth is a shrine, it's the anchor. Quirky tidbit. Some poor families in ancient Greece passed down hearthstones as heirlooms, literally a chunk of the family's original fire pit, carried from home to home like a relic. If you had that stone, you had your lineage, even if the house was gone. You rest in that apartment longer than expected, partly because the widow sings off-key lullabies to her chickens, partly because someone needs to. From there, you're drawn to a shepherd's hut in the foothills. No hearth here, just a ring of stones and a half-burnt log. The shepherd is young, probably lied about his age to get work. He's got more enthusiasm than planning skills, and exactly one boot that fits. He's singing to the sheep, which is either charming or deeply confusing to the sheep. But you nudge the fire anyway. Reignite it with a soft pop that startles both him and the nearest ram. He laughs. You like him. Historians still argue whether shepherd fires, set on open plains or hillsides, were considered part of Hestia's domain. Some scholars claim only enclosed hearths counted. Others suggest any gathering of warmth and safety, no matter how temporary, was hers to guard. You lean toward the second opinion, probably because you've seen too many night winds tear through lonely places like this. And you know that warmth, even brief, is still a blessing. The shepherd sits, pulls a crust of bread from his bag, and tears it in half. He tosses the other piece into the fire. For you, he says. You glow. Later, you find yourself beside a forge. Not inside, exactly. Hephaestus wouldn't love that. But close enough to feel the heat of molten metal and hear the rhythmic clang of hammer on anvil. The smith is swearing under his breath. Something about a ruined blade, and who sharpened this thing with their teeth? The forge isn't your domain. But there's a corner hearth where his apprentice cooks lentils over a patient flame. The boy stirs them with exaggerated slowness, trying to look busy while absolutely doing nothing. You adjust the flame beneath his pot, just enough to avoid a burn. He startles, then grins. Thanks, he whispers. You don't answer. You just settle. Because even in a forge, you're not out of place. You're always somewhere nearby, where hands create and breath fogs in warmth. You drift next into a home where grief hangs thick. A mother sits by the hearth, not crying, not praying, just sitting. Stillness so loud it echoes. There's no food on the fire, no log stacked nearby. Just ashes gone cold. You ease into the space. Quietly. You don't start the fire. Not yet. Instead, you warm the air just slightly, enough for her to notice, to remember that warmth exists, that things can be rekindled. Eventually, she shifts, stands, tosses a handful of kindling into the pit. The fire doesn't roar. It exhales. So does she. You remain, just a little while longer. You leave that house slowly, like backing out of a room where someone's just fallen asleep. There's no rush. You've learned not to tug at healing. Now the day swells to its fullest. Sun high, shadows short, and you feel in the bones of the city. Heat buzzes across rooftops, curls off sun-baked walls. Even the bees get lazy in this weather. You're pulled to a row of bakeries in the inner forum. Brick ovens smolder behind arched doorways, their mouths open like yawning lions. The scent, yeast, flour, smoke, honey, hits you like a hymn. You enter the smallest bakery, where two sisters knead dough with the grim determination of women at war. Their arms glisten with sweat. One of them has a streak of flour on her eyebrow and doesn't know it. You like her already. Their hearth is enormous, blackened stone, red-hot coals, and a metal paddle as wide as your shoulders. Every loaf they make touches your breath. Every crust crackles in your presence. You hum along with the rhythm. Slap, fold, turn, tuck. Mainstream historical fact. In many ancient cities, communal ovens were maintained by guilds or neighborhoods, but bakeries often kept a shrine to Hestia near the door or beside the oven. She was considered patron not only of warmth, but food shared in peace. Some owners would toss in a pinch of salt or flour before each day's first bake, a silent offering to keep the fire friendly. At noon, the sisters pause to wipe their faces. One murmurs thanks to the fire before sliding in the day's final tray. You respond by sending a slow, even heat across the oven floor, careful not to scorch. The bread comes out perfect, golden, fragrant, crusty enough to earn applause from a passing dog. You drift. Next, you're back near a noble villa, this one grander than most. Marble lions at the gate, fig trees pruned within an inch of their lives. Inside, a banquet's being prepared. Servants rush like bees on espresso. In the great hall, the hearth sits beneath a canopy of painted gods. You're one of them, oddly enough. Someone painted your face too round, your robe too blue. You've been called worse. A cook kneels before the fire, adjusting a copper pot filled with lamb, garlic, and dates. He doesn't look up, but he mutters, "Easy now, lady. Don't go burning this like last time." You consider getting offended, but then he adds, "You're still my favorite," and you decide to warm the pot just right. Quirky tidbit. In some homes, the kitchen fire was never allowed to die out. A live coal was banked in ash overnight, then reignited the next morning. It was bad luck, no, terrifying luck, to let it go cold. Housewives kept it alive like a child. And if it died, some communities had special fire carriers who would bring fresh flame from the town temple, wrapped in wool or horn. You help this fire stay alive. It crackles gently, obedient and proud. The lamb simmers, the cook hums. Someone spills wine. Someone else slips on it. No one dies, but egos are bruised. You move on. There's a courtyard school next. Not exactly your turf. But children are eating lunch on the steps, and someone's roasting chestnuts on a brazier near the wall. A teacher crouches beside the heat, poking the embers with a stick and muttering about unpaid wages and sticky ink pots. A girl plops down beside him, unbothered. She shares her bread with the teacher and tosses a chestnut into the fire. "That's for the warm lady," she says. He blinks. "What warm lady?" She shrugs. "She's in the heat." You lean a little closer. Children can see things grown-ups forget. Historians still argue whether hearth deities like you were taught to children or simply absorbed, like lullabies or the taste of home. Some say girls learn about you through domestic rituals. Others think your name was just part of the air, woven into habit, not doctrine. The girl hums a song you haven't heard in 100 years. It's off-key. It's perfect. You linger. Next, you're drawn to the outskirts of town. A funerary procession winds along a path toward the necropolis. The air is dry, the mood even drier. But inside the family tomb, a small hearth still waits. It's ceremonial, not functional. No food will be cooked here, but the family lights it anyway. One by one, they offer pine twigs and a splash of oil. Someone whispers your name. You're not there to judge or comfort. You're just present, because warmth belongs in goodbyes too. Back in town, evening spills like syrup down alleyways. You visit a midwife's cottage, where a labor fire burns low beside a birthing stool. The mother sweats, shouts praise. So does her husband from the porch. You press yourself into the hearth and breathe slow, rhythmic heat. You're not the goddess of birth. That's someone else's department. But warmth eases pain, and presence eases fear. And when the baby's cry finally breaks the silence, you shimmer a little brighter. Dinner fires spark all over town now. Fish cooks on a clay plate. Mushrooms sizzle in olive oil. Someone burns lentils and pretends it was on purpose. The sky turns violet. Chimneys exhale their last of the day. You drift through them like fog through reeds. Tonight, you've touched hundreds of fires. Tomorrow, you'll do it again. Because someone's got to keep the world warm. And lucky for everyone, you never sleep. The moon climbs higher, and with it, your presence shifts. You begin to gather yourself from the hundreds of flames that crackled through dinner, through lullabies sung by exhausted parents, through quiet conversations over olives and cheese, through lonely teacups held by windows. One by one, the lights in homes flicker out like eyelids growing heavy. You move with them, dimming, softening, retreating, but never truly gone. Now, your steps bring you to a quiet place tucked behind the oldest apothecary in the city. A widow lives here. She's barely past middle age, but sorrow aged her prematurely. Her husband, a stonemason, lost to a quarry collapse. Her only daughter gone with fever. She doesn't cry much anymore. Instead, she talks of fire. It's not large, not grand, just a clay brazier in the center of her room. But it's fed nightly with olive twigs and dried orange peels, and always smells faintly of hope. She stirs it now, murmuring the names of her loved ones. Her voice is cracked, but steady. You drift closer and settle into the coals. She doesn't look at you, but she knows you're there. Mainstream historical fact. In ancient households, widows and elderly women were often the last keepers of tradition. While temples and festivals celebrated the grand gods, it was the matriarchs who tended domestic rites, pouring libations at hearths, tying ribbons around beams, burning herbs to guard the doorways. These women didn't need priesthoods. They had memory, and that was enough. The widow hums a lullaby now, not for a child, not even for herself, just a melody for the fire. For you, you let the warmth radiate a little deeper than usual, wrapping the room in a slow embrace. Her fingers stop trembling. Her spine straightens. She whispers, "Thank you," without needing an answer. You move again, out through a narrow alley where cats lounge like royalty and ivy strangles old archways. A young boy chases his shadow here, wooden sword in hand, practicing the art of battle with dramatic grunts and fearless lunges. He's supposed to be asleep, but his hearth is still glowing back home, a single coal tucked beneath gray ash. You make a note to keep it alive until he returns. Adventurers deserve a warm welcome. Nearby, a bathhouse closes the night. The steam hisses softly, mixing with incense from the changing rooms. A tired woman extinguishes the lamps one by one, her sandals scuffing the mosaic floor. You hover near the main stove, still warm, still damp. She touches the bricks once, just once, and sighs, "Bless the Lady of Flame." She means you. You don't need grand temples. You don't need festivals. You just need someone to remember. Quirky tidbit. In some parts of the ancient world, bathhouses had their own hearth spirits, sometimes thought to be cousins of you or lesser household deities with specialties in steam, health, or even gossip. One text mentions a tile mother, believed to live under the hot floors, who would whisper advice to those who sat long enough in the steam. You wouldn't mind a nickname. You glide through the vents and out again into cooler air. Back in the city's heart, night fully arrives. The market square is quiet now, but traces of warmth still glow beneath vendor carts. Fires banked in sand pits, waiting to be reignited with sunrise. A fig seller sleeps beside his cart, cloak pulled over his head. His brazier smokes slightly, casting delicate shadows across his sun-worn hands. You nudge the coals gently, keeping them just warm enough not to die. Not every flame burns bright. Some just wait. Historians still argue whether hearth worship was purely practical or deeply emotional. Did people believe you were real, or just treat you like a superstition worth keeping, like crossing fingers or knocking on wood? But maybe it doesn't matter, because belief doesn't need altars. It just needs action. A pot stirred, a light tended, a whisper in the dark. You turn toward the temple district now. Not many fires burn there at this hour, just a few ceremonial lamps, watched over by sleepy acolytes who pretend not to doze. You skip the grand columns and walk instead to a side chapel, tiny, cracked, and half forgotten. Inside, a niche in the wall holds your statue. It's plain, simple robes, no gilding, no inscriptions, just a figure sitting beside a flame. Someone left a small dish of olive oil beside it, still full. You smile, metaphorically, because here's the thing about being the goddess of the hearth. You're never center stage. You're backstage. You're behind the curtain, beneath the table, wrapped in the comforter, stirred into the stew. You're the warmth they take for granted until it flickers. And that's okay. You don't need applause. You just need to burn. You take one more walk through the city, now dozing like a cat on a cushion, over rooftops where laundry lines sway in silence, past gardens sleeping beneath moonlight and moths, through windows in the homes, some lonely, some loud with dreams. You check every fire. You visit every ember. And then you return to your own little flame. It lives in the oldest part of town, inside a shrine no one opens anymore. Dust on the floor, a cracked tile by the threshold. But your fire there, it still burns. You curl into it like a sigh, wrapping yourself in heat and memory. It's been a long day, but you wouldn't trade it for all the thunderbolts in Olympus. Your rest is brief. Even gods can only nap so long when the world never truly sleeps. Before sunrise paints the hills, you're already rising with the smoke. No alarm clocks, no golden roosters singing your praises. Just a silent pull of routine. 1,000 households waiting for your return. First stop, the hillside vineyard just past the east wall. It's still dark enough that the dew shines silver, clinging to the leaves like whispered secrets. A field hand kneels by a low fire, heating a kettle for his pre-dawn tea. He has a limp from an old war, and lighting the fire hurts his knees, but he always does it anyway, because the vines need their tending. and the tea needs its heat. You settle into the fire without a word. A single pop from the wood lets him know you're there. He smiles. Mainstream historical fact. Vineyard workers in ancient Greece and early Rome often started before dawn, tending vines while the air was still cool. Fires were lit not just for warmth, but as timekeepers. When the embers faded, it was time to move from pruning to tying, or from harvesting to pressing. The hearth, even in the fields, was a clock. The kettle sings low. The man pours 2 cups, one for himself, one for no one, or maybe for you. You accept in spirit. He doesn't expect you to sip, but the gesture matters. Further down the slope, the baker's oven glows hot. You drift there next. She's already elbow deep in dough, humming something off-key but comforting, a tune her grandmother taught her, her aprons dusted in flour, her hair tied up with a reed strip. No fancy laurel wreaths here, just work and the fire. She feeds what into the great brick mouth, then nods. Morning, Hestia, she mutters, not looking up. You stir the flames just a little higher. The first loaf always burns if you don't. Quirky tidbit. Some villages believe that if the day's first loaf burned, it meant Hestia was angry or distracted. In one rural area, they even left butter crust by the fire as bribes. You're not saying it worked, but hey, you like butter. The baker moves with rhythm now. Press, fold, score, lift. Her daughter runs in from the courtyard, barefoot and yawning, holding a kindling stick for the smaller kitchen fire. You follow her back inside, ducking through doorways you pass 1,000 times, yet never grow bored of. This fire, too, springs the life of the sigh. You linger. By now the city is waking, not all at once, but in layers, like honey poured over rough bread. You move with it, down alleyways where fishmongers spark their lanterns, past laundresses beating cloth against river rocks, across terraces where old men sip water wine and argue about whether the moon looked bigger 50 years ago. Historians still argue whether hearth deities were genuinely worshipped or simply tolerated as part of daily superstition. Did you hold real sway, or were you just a ritual box to tick before breakfast? The question doesn't bother you, because real belief isn't in statues or sacrifices. It's in consistency, in habits, in flame, and no one forgets to light the fire. You visit a home near the theater next. Inside, a young actor is practicing lines for a tragedy. She doesn't speak them aloud, just mouths them in front of a polished bronze mirror while stirring lentils on the hearth. Her words flicker like the firelight. You smile at the ambition, at the multitasking, at the seasoning she's definitely overdoing because she's distracted. Her older sister walks in, pinches some salt from the pouch, and sprinkles it with a sigh. Stage star or not, you will not ruin dinner, she mutters. The younger one grins, still mouthing lines. You warm the pot just right. Perfect simmer. No scalding. Time moves differently when you're everywhere at once. And yet, you notice details. The widow from the night before, she's laying fresh herbs on her hearth, muttering a blessing under her breath. The fig seller, still snoring under his cart, but his brazier holds enough coals to see him through to lunch. The bathhouse, empty, quiet, steaming anew. You're not omniscient, exactly, but you're present, deeply. That's what they forget about you. Other gods strike with lightning or ride waves of thunder. They demand temples, tributes, and flawless recitations. But you're already there, before the offering, after the prayer, in the soot between floorboards, in the warmth of a leftover stew. You head toward the healer's hut next. A boy is sick, his cough echoing against the clay walls like a cracked drum. His mother sits nearby, spooning broth over the fire in slow, hopeful circles. You lend a little heat, just enough to keep it warm but not boil over. She doesn't notice, or maybe she does. Her shoulders ease. Her eyes soften. She thanks no one in particular. That's fine. You reach the marketplace just as it begins to fill. Fire pots line the stalls, some for boiling dyes, others for warming sweet wine. A girl roasts chestnuts over an open flame, singing a tune about unlucky chickens and mischievous goats. You add a little pop to her coals, and she squeals when one nut bursts with perfect timing. Magic? Maybe. Just timing? Maybe that too. You're almost done with your circuit. Almost. But there's one place you can't skip. At the edge of the city is a hospice. Small, quiet, clean. An old man rests there, wrapped in a blanket faded by 100 washings. His fire is low. The nurse thinks he's asleep, but he's not. He watches the flame like an old friend. When you enter, his eyes flicker. He doesn't speak, but his lips move. A name. Yours. He remembers. You brighten the flame. Gently, respectfully, just a little. He closes his eyes again and smiles. You linger longer than usual. Then, slowly you rise, smoke twisting in slow spirals. The sun climbs, the fires roar, and you fade for now. Your rest is brief. Even gods can only nap so long when the world never truly sleeps. Before sunrise paints the hills, you're already rising with the smoke. No alarm clocks, no golden roosters singing your praises. Just a silent pull routine. 1,000 households waiting for your return. First stop, the hillside vineyard just past the east wall. It's still dark enough that the dew shines silver, clinging to the leaves like whispered secrets. A field hand kneels by a low fire, heating a kettle for his pre-dawn tea. He has a limp from an old war, and lighting the fire hurts his knees, but he always does it anyway, because the vines need their tending, and the tea needs its heat. You settle into the fire without a word. A single pop from the wood lets him know you're there. He smiles. Mainstream historical fact. Vineyard workers in ancient Greece and early Rome often started before dawn, tending vines while the air was still cool. Fires were lit not just for warmth, but as timekeepers. When embers faded, it was time to move from pruning to tying, or from harvesting to pressing. The hearth, even in the fields, was a clock. The kettle sings low. The man pours 2 cups, one for himself, one for no one, or maybe for you. You accept in spirit. He doesn't expect you to sip, but the gesture matters. Further down the slope, the baker's oven glows hot. You drift there next. She's already elbow deep in dough, humming something off-key but comforting, a tune her grandmother taught her. Her apron's dusted in flour, her hair tied up with a reed strip. No fancy laurel wreaths here, just work and the fire. She feeds wood into the great brick mouth, then nods. Morning, Hestia, she mutters, not looking up. You stir the flames just a little higher. The first loaf always burns if you don't. Quirky tidbit. Some villages believe that if the day's first loaf burned, it meant Hestia was angry or distracted. In one rural area, they even left buttered crusts by the fire as bribes. You're not saying it worked, but hey, you like butter. The baker moves with rhythm now. Press, fold, score, lift. Her daughter runs in from the courtyard, barefoot and yawning, holding a kindling stick for the smaller kitchen fire. You follow her back inside, ducking through doorways you pass 1,000 times, yet never grow bored of. This fire, too, springs the life of the sigh. You linger. By now the city is waking, not all at once, but in layers, like honey poured over rough bread. You move with it, down alleyways where fishmongers spark their lanterns, past laundresses beating cloth against river rocks, across terraces where old men sip watered wine and argue about whether the moon looked bigger 50 years ago. Historians still argue whether hearth deities were genuinely worshipped or simply tolerated as part of daily superstition. Did you hold real sway, or were you just a ritual box to tick before breakfast? The question doesn't bother you, because real belief isn't in statues or sacrifices. It's inconsistency, in habits, in flame, and no one forgets to light the fire. You visit a home near the theater next. Inside, a young actor is practicing lines for a tragedy. She doesn't speak them aloud, just mouths them in front of a polished bronze mirror while stirring lentils on the hearth. Her words flicker like the firelight. You smile at the ambition, at the multitasking, at the seasoning she's definitely overdoing because she's distracted. Her older sister walks in, pinches some salt from the pouch, and sprinkles it with a sigh. Stage star or not, you will not ruin dinner, she mutters. The younger one grins, still mouthing lines. You warm the pot just right. Perfect simmer. No scalding. Time moves differently when you're everywhere at once. And yet, you notice details. The widow from the night before, she's laying fresh herbs on her hearth, muttering a blessing under her breath. The fig seller, still snoring under his cart, but his brazier holds enough coals to see him through to lunch. The bathhouse, empty, quiet, steaming anew. You're not omniscient, exactly, but you're present, deeply. That's what they forget about you. Other gods strike with lightning or ride waves of thunder. They demand temples, tributes, and flawless recitations. But you're already there, before the offering, after the prayer, in the soot between floorboards, in the warmth of a leftover stew. You head toward the healer's hut next. A boy is sick, his cough echoing against clay walls like a cracked drum. His mother sits nearby, spooning broth over the fire in slow, hopeful circles. You lend a little heat, just enough to keep it warm but not boil over. She doesn't notice, or maybe she does. Her shoulders ease. Her eyes soften. She thanks no one in particular. That's fine. You reach the marketplace just as it begins to fill. Fire pots line the stalls, some for boiling dyes, others for warming sweet wine. A girl roasts chestnuts over an open flame, singing a tune about unlucky chickens and mischievous goats. You add a little pop to her coals, and she squeals when one nut bursts with perfect timing. Magic? Maybe. Just timing? Maybe that too. You're almost done with your circuit. Almost. But there's one place you can't skip. At the edge of the city is a hospice. Small, quiet, clean. An old man rests there, wrapped in a blanket faded by 100 washings. His fire is low. The nurse thinks he's asleep, but he's not. He watches the flame like an old friend. When you enter, his eyes flicker. He doesn't speak, but his lips move. A name, yours. He remembers. You brighten the flame. Gently, respectfully, just a little. He closes his eyes again and smiles. You linger longer than usual. Then, slowly you rise, smoke twisting in slow spirals. The sun climbs, the fires roar, and you fade for now. By midday, the sun sharpens its tone, no longer a gentle golden wash, but something fiercer, more opinionated. Shadows shrink, stone walls glare, and the hearts begin to sweat. But you adapt. You always do. You settle near a sun-shielded courtyard, half draped in grapevine shade. Beneath it, a family gathers for their midday meal. 3 generations, 1 table, and a brazier bubbling with chickpeas and garlic oil. A grandmother folds herbs with nimble fingers, while the toddler beside her smashes olives into decorative art across his tunic. He's a mess, but a joyful one. You curl around a fire gently, just enough to keep the dish warm without boiling the piece. Mainstream historical fact. In ancient Greek homes, especially during summer, hearth fires were shifted to smaller portable braziers set in shaded outdoor areas. These minimized smoke indoors and kept homes cooler while still enabling traditional cooking and sacrificial rituals. Hearth didn't always mean center of the room. It meant center of the moment. The grandfather lifts a clay mug of watered wine, murmurs a short prayer, and tips it just slightly toward the flame. A libation, a habit, a hope. The table settles into laughter and food. Even as cicadas begin their usual midday opera, you float on the periphery, humming with warmth but not intrusion. Then you're off again, because someone is about to overboil lentils 4 doors down, and if you don't nudge that pot, it's going to turn into a gray sludge tragedy. You save it. Barely. No thanks necessary. You slip into a villa on the western slope next. Expensive tile floors, perfumed air, not a speck of ash in sight. The lady of the house is hosting an afternoon poetry gathering, which is a fancy way of saying 5 women lounging on cushions complaining about their husbands and quoting Sappho. You respect it. One guest fans herself languidly, while another pokes the hearth with an ivory rod. The fire's mostly decorative here, a symbol of luxury and calm, not function. Quirky tidbit. In wealthier households, especially during warmer months, the hearth sometimes became a performance space. Hosts would float petals in shallow pans of scented oil above the flame, letting the scent drift up between verses. Guests believe this encouraged intellectual combustion. Mostly, it just smelled like lavender and smoke. One of the guests leans in close, whispers something scandalous about a merchant's second wife, and the whole room explodes in muffled gasps and giggles. You flicker slightly, an echo of your own amusement, and the women pause. One looks toward the fire, suddenly solemn. Hestia is listening, she says with a wink. Good. Another laughs. She probably knows more gossip than Apollo. They clink cups, and the laughter resumes. You stay only a moment longer, then head east. There's a potter's kiln not far from the city gates. Its fire isn't about warmth or food. It's transformation. Clay to cup, wet to durable, soft to enduring. You admire it. The potter is quiet today, his hands coated in slip, sweat dripping from his brow. He's shaping a jar with the ease of someone who's argued with the earth for decades and somehow made peace. His apprentice fans a kiln with a steady rhythm, keeping the heat even. The blaze roars here, not with chaos but with purpose. You love that. Historians still argue whether hearth deities like you extended their reach to kilns and forges. Technically, Hephaestus had the patent on fire as weapon, fire as craft. But in practice, many artisans left small offerings to you too, figuring a calm, quiet flame was less likely to crack their wares. You didn't mind. You don't need official jurisdiction to lend warmth. The potter mutters a blessing to both of you, just to be safe. Smart man. You wander from the kiln to the city baths. Inside, the heat is more controlled, more steamy, more deliberate. Braziers heat copper cisterns, filling the stone pools with warm water. You snake through the steam like a sigh, listening to soft conversations, splashes, even a few off-key songs echoing from the side chambers. A boy scrubs the tiles. His bucket is too full, sloshing with each jerk of the rag. You lighten it by just a finger's weight. He won't notice, but his arms will thank you. A woman reclines near the hot pool, her hair pinned high with polished bone. She dips one foot into the steaming water, flinches, then smiles. Just the right temperature. You approve. On the other side of town, a funeral is beginning. You approach carefully. Not all flames are joyful. The family has built a small pyre in the sacred grove, far from the city's clamor. The body is wrapped in linen, fragrant herbs tucked beneath the chin. The priest lights the torch with solemn hands. The fire is slow to catch. Until you arrive, you don't blaze. You don't scream. You coax until the wood sighs into flame, until the linen curls like dry leaves, until the smoke rises like a soul whispering goodbye. The family weeps. You stay until the last ember cools, then drift back toward the noise, because now someone's birthday cake has collapsed. A mother is panicking over an uneven fire in the corner oven of a small home. The dough didn't rise, the top is cracked, and she's one more ruined pastry away from meltdown. You intervene with mercy. A little heat boost, a puff of steady warmth. The cake salvages itself. The child watching from the doorway claps as if it's magic. He's not entirely wrong. You're everywhere again. In festival torches lining the temple square. In the single candle lit beside an expectant mother's bed. In the hearth left burning for a husband returning late from sea. You're small but constant. And now the sun begins to fall. Shadows stretch. Braziers are lit. Dinner fires crackle to life. The world exhales. And you, ever the first flame and the last, glow brighter for night's return. The day folds into its quieter half, and you, ever the silent thread in the tapestry, follow its rhythm like a favorite melody. Evening is your element, not because it's dramatic, but because it's gentle. People start drifting inward. Feet are dustier, voices softer, and the fires they light now are more for comfort than for chores. In the north quarter, a young woman lights a taper from her family hearth and carries it carefully across the courtyard. Her brother is getting married tomorrow, and she's preparing the ceremonial flame, a tradition stretching back generations. She doesn't speak to you, but she moves like she knows you're watching. She places a candle in a clay niche by the door and bows her head. Mainstream historical fact. In ancient Greece, it was common to transfer fire from the family hearth to a new household when a daughter married. The symbolic gesture ensured that the warmth and protection of the original home would continue into her new life. The ritual was sacred, and so were you. You follow her flame back to its origin, where her mother tended a low fire and stirs lentil stew. She hums as she works. No words, just the sound of someone who's too tired to sing, but too content to stop. A dog sleeps nearby, nose twitching in dreams. There's peace here, a lived-in kind of peace. Down the hill, two lovers sneak out through a vine-covered gap in the wall. They whisper and giggle, stepping carefully through the olive groves. One carries a lantern, the other a picnic of figs and wine. You trail them like a nosy ant. The lantern flickers, nearly dies, then steadies. You don't like the dark, snuffing joy, so you keep the wick strong. They settle beneath a sycamore tree and share kisses between bites of fruit. You warm the wine gently, just enough to remind them someone's watching their story unfold. They won't notice. That's fine. Their love burns bright enough for the both of you. Quirky tidbit. In certain Greek regions, secret night fires, small and hidden, were considered lucky for eloping couples. Lighting one without getting caught was believed to ward off misfortune. You never told anyone you fanned a few on purpose. Meanwhile, the city glows in preparation. A festival is close, one honoring Apollo. Ironically enough, his temples are polished, his statues draped in new garlands. But still, people light your hearths. Because even gods of sun and prophecy need to come home to a warm bowl of soup. In a modest house at the edge of town, an old man sharpens his lyre's tuning pins near a flickering flame. He hasn't played in years, but tonight he's decided to try. His fingers are stiff, his memory fogged, but the fire in his hearth recognizes his rhythm before the strings do. He strums a lullaby. You pulse in time with it, not quite melody, not quite beat, just presence. Historians still argue whether domestic rituals like lullabies or bedtime prayers were truly part of your domain, or whether people just like the idea of a goddess who wouldn't judge them for singing off-key. You don't care either way. You listen anyway. Elsewhere, a group of travelers rest beside the city gate. They've set up camp with the approval of a local guard, who lends them a taper from the gatehouse brazier. They light their own modest fire with reverent care. There's stew bubbling in a dented pot, a hunk of bread warming on a rock, and laughter as they share stories. You hover over them like a borrowed blanket. A child yawns and curls up near the embers. A dog, different one, bigger, hungrier, happier, curls up beside the child. You glow for them, too, because travelers carry news, and news is heat of its own kind. A few streets away, a boy lights a single oil lamp by his bedside and starts reading aloud from a cracked scroll. He stumbles on a few words, then tries again. His grandmother listens with eyes closed, mouthing the familiar lines before dozing off. The scroll's edges catch the light, and so does the ink. You resist the urge to read along. Barely. The fire here is small, but not weak. That's the thing people never quite grasp. Size isn't strength. Consistency is. A tiny flame can warm a kingdom. And now, the city exhales again. Dinner's over. Plates stacked. Breadcrumbs swept. Slippers scuffed against tile as people shuffle toward rest. You dip into a workshop where a man is packing tools into a wooden chest. He kisses the handle of a hammer before storing it, an old habit, half superstition, half affection. His workbench is scarred, his tunic smudged, his fingers calloused. He blows out the lantern. You catch the spark and tuck it into the hearth, just in case he needs it again tomorrow. In another corner of the city, a midwife soaks cloth in warm water near a brazier. A young woman labors behind a curtain, sweat beading at her brow. The room smells of iron and lavender. The fire flickers like a heartbeat, fast then slow, then steady again. You glow carefully here. Not too much, just enough. When the child's first cry rises, you flare slightly. The mother doesn't notice, but the midwife smiles at the flame. She always does. Finally, you settle into the central hearth of the town square, a large, stone-ringed flame kept by public stewards. It's low now, but steady. Citizens pass by and nod. Some leave small offerings, bread crusts, olive pits, a folded prayer scratched on bark. You keep them all. Even the crumbs count, especially the crumbs. The moon rises, the wind shifts, and somewhere in the distance, a musician plucks a single string and sings something so quiet even you have to lean in to hear. It's a song about home. You glow a little brighter, because home isn't always walls and roofs and locks. Sometimes it's just a light, one that never forgets how to wait. Somewhere above the rooftops, the stars start their slow turn, and you follow, not out of obligation, but instinct. You've always loved this part of the night. The city sleeps, but not fully. It rests in that half-conscious way people do when they're just aware enough to enjoy being unaware. You drift through a baker's courtyard, where tomorrow's loaves are already being prepared. Two apprentices in saffron robes knead dough by lamplight. One hums a sea shanty. The other yawns so wide he nearly folds into the bread. Behind them, a fire flickers in the clay oven, its embers banked and patient. You touch it gently, just enough to keep it warm, not greedy. Heat now would spoil the process. Bread needs time, just like people. Mainstream historical fact. Ancient Greek bakeries often operated at night, with fires started in the deepest hours of darkness, so bread could be ready by dawn. These early ovens were communal, and many households brought dough to bake and share hearths, a public ritual with private stakes. You hover in the rafters, letting the scent of yeast and ash wrap around you like a shawl. The fire cracks. A flame jumps. The boy laughs and says, "Did you see that? It likes me." You approve of this theory. Elsewhere, a temple steward stokes a sacred flame. His movements are reverent, almost theatrical. A scoop of fine olive oil, a whisper of a chant, a steady hand adjusting the wick. You don't actually live in this flame. It belongs to another, but you're fond of it all the same. He bows before leaving. You flicker in return. Quirky tidbit. In some mystery cults, it was believed that hearth flames could speak in crackles if you knew the language. High priestesses sometimes claimed to hear guidance through fire, though skeptics insisted it was just wind and imagination. You'll never tell. Farther down the slope, an old widow wraps herself in a teal shawl and checks her brazier one last time. The coals are low but still glowing. She places her hand above the warmth, not to cook or heat water, but just to remember what heat feels like. You nestle deeper. She doesn't speak, doesn't need to, but as she closes her eyes, she mouths something that might be your name. Then she sleeps, still sitting. You stay. Historians still argue whether household devotion to you is ritualistic or deeply emotional. Some claim it was out of fear, burned offerings to keep bad luck at bay. Others say it was love, pure and simple, because you were the one god who never demanded temples, just attention. Back toward the city center, a guard walks his final round along the palace walls. His torch burns steady. You flicker through the windows behind him, watching the slow rhythm of rest from inside out. One chamber is completely dark, on purpose. Inside, a scholar lies face down on a scroll, drooling slightly onto a diagram of celestial orbits. His hearth is out, his lamp snuffed, but you remember, this one always forgets to feed the flame when he's excited. So you rekindle a soft glow from the last ash-flecked ember. It's the smallest thing you've done all day. It might also be your favorite. In the servants' quarters, two young girls huddle near the stove, giggling over dried fruit and stolen candied nuts. One tells a ghost story involving haunted soup. The other clutches a ladle like a weapon. You make the kettle whistle softly at just the right moment. They shriek, then laugh, then promise vengeance. They'll forget in an hour. But for now, they're alive in a way only children near bedtime can be. Thrilled and safe and just a little sticky. You adore them. You travel across rooftops now, dancing between chimney smoke and wind. The air is crisp, cool enough to remind mortals of their breath, but not cold enough to bite. A perfect balance. You were always good at that, being just enough. You pass over a stable where horses snort in their sleep. One kicks a wall, dreaming of open fields. The stable hand, wrapped in russet wool, snores on a hay bale, an apple core still in hand. You tuck the blanket tighter over him, just because. At the outer edge of town, a small family lights a new hearth for the first time. They moved into a modest cottage after seasons of struggle. The father strikes flint. The mother holds dry kindling. Their child watches wide-eyed, clutching a blanket stitched with tiny rabbits. It takes 3 tries. Then the spark catches. You inhale, and you bloom. The mother exhales with relief. The father closes his eyes. The child squeals and claps. You settle in. New hearts always feel a little different, like learning a new dance in familiar shoes. You'll learn their rhythm. You always do. The stars are almost at their peak now. The city hums like a tired instrument after a long performance. You don't need applause, but you do appreciate the quiet. And that's when you notice it, a soft weeping near the town's edge. You follow the sound and find a man kneeling by a cold hearth. The coals are long dead. His shoulders shake. A letter lies beside him, crumpled. You hover near but don't enter. Not yet. Grief doesn't want warmth right away. But you wait. Eventually, he sighs, lifts the poker and prods the ash. A tiny glimmer stirs. He doesn't notice, but you do. You blow gently. A curl of smoke rises. He blinks, tries again. The fire catches. Barely, but it's enough. He doesn't smile, but he sits straighter. You move closer. You'll stay here tonight. There are times when fire is joy, celebration, laughter. And there are times when it's just proof that something, someone, still exists. You're honored to be both. The city has settled into that syrupy depth of night, where time no longer ticks. It stretches. The hearths burn low. The winds hush their gossip, and every wall seems to exhale. This is when even the gods begin to dream. But you, Hestia, are still awake. not out of obligation, not because you're forced to be. You simply prefer it this way. After all, who else is going to tend the coals when the world forgets? You pass through a wealthy merchant's estate, arches carved from ivory, linens dyed in saffron and indigo, floors so polished you nearly slip. His hearth glows with a quiet dignity, surrounded by copper cookware and olive oil jars stacked like soldiers. A servant snores nearby, chin tucked against a bundle of firewood. You adjust the logs, tuck the flames in tighter. The wealth matters less to you than the way the pot has been left half filled with chickpeas and cardamom. Someone will finish the meal in the morning. That means hope. Hope gets your attention more than gold. From there, you drift into leaner quarters. In one room, a teacher sleeps sitting up, a wax tablet still balanced on her knee. Her fingers twitch, still working equations in dreams. Her hearth is tiny, barely more than a handful of ash, but it's hers. You rekindle it, just enough for her cat to roll closer, sighing into the warmth like it's been personally blessed. It has mainstream historical fact. In many Greek homes, the hearth served not just as a heat source, but as the spiritual center of the household. Every meal, birth, and farewell circled the flame. Newborns were even walked around the hearth in a ritual called the amphidromia, marking their official entrance into the family. Above one hearth, a faded oil painting of such a ritual rests on a mantle. A baby held high by a father, two older children giggling nearby, and you, symbolized by a gold-painted flame at the family's feet. They probably don't remember what it means, but you do. You always do. A scholar might call it superstition, or symbolism, or projection, but you call it belonging, and that's all that's ever mattered. You travel next to a temple at the city's edge. Not yours, technically. It's devoted to Demeter, your sister. But you're welcome here. You always are. The temple's central hearth is massive, built of limestone and bronze, with a carved relief of a wheat sheaf that someone clearly polished recently. The priestess sleeps nearby on a pallet stuffed with straw and rosemary. You curl around her ankles, not to wake her, just to keep her toes from going numb. She mutters something about offerings and missing figs. You whisper a joke into the flames, something about Demeter hoarding snacks. The fire crackles in amusement. Quirky tidbit. Some ancient sources suggest that priestesses were trained to read messages in fire crackles the same way some people claim to read tea leaves. One infamous priestess in Phocis claimed to predict weather, political betrayal, and bad hair days, all by listening to her hearth. You never confirmed whether she was legit, but you admired the confidence. The hours stretch. You visit the city gates, where guards huddle around braziers. The warmth there is more tactical than spiritual, but you still pass through. A younger guard drops a crust of bread into the fire by accident. His captain curses. You catch the bread mid-fall and send it into the air again, flipping once before it lands safely in his hand. He blinks, says nothing, just eats it. Sometimes a miracle should feel small. Historians still argue whether you were once a major deity whose influence faded or whether you were always meant to be the background rhythm, the quiet note beneath the melody. They debate your absence from wars, scandals, love affairs. They seem to forget that without you, no soldier would return home to anything warm. No bride would be welcomed, no newborn named. You were never the crescendo. You were the reason the music could begin. You pass over a small villa, where the family's hearth has gone cold. The father paces, worried. He believes his sick child's fever is a punishment, that perhaps they've offended the gods. You feel for him. You ease the door open with a soft creak of wind and re-enter the hearth. The coals respond instantly. The flame blooms, not hot, not roaring, just steady. The father turns, startled. He drops to his knees, murmurs a thank you. Doesn't even know which god he's thanking. That's fine by you. You were never here for the credit. He calls to his wife to come see. She enters carrying a cup of barley tea and stops short. Then she smiles, just a little. The child stirs in bed. You keep the warmth light low, just enough to suggest healing without making promises. Mortals need room to believe. In a bakery's back room, a girl sneaks a lump of dough under her shawl. Her family's hearth hasn't been lit in 3 days. Not because of blasphemy, because her father broke his arm and her mother's sick. You follow her home, trailing like candle smoke, when she kneels at their fire pit. Trembling hands clutching kindling, you wait until the flint spark lands. Then you blow gently. The flame catches. She gasps. Her little brother cheers. She smiles, not because of you, but because of what you lit. That, too, is enough. The stars begin to fade. A pale shimmer outlines the horizon. Morning is thinking about arriving. Soon, the bakers will rise. The scholars will stretch. The priestesses will burn fig leaves and chant to ancestors. Your night is almost done. But first, you visit your oldest friend, a statue of yourself tucked into the far side of the agora. It's modest, no temple, just a nook of stone carved with your likeness. No offerings rest at your feet tonight, just a small, chipped bowl with last week's ash. You perch beside it anyway. Not every fire burns in wood. Sometimes it lives in habit, in memory, in breath. The city begins to exhale again. The first rooster cries. A merchant curses sleepily. A child cries for breakfast. And you stretch, glow, and prepare to do it all over again. The first real flame of dawn peaks over the rooftops, catching on weathered tiles and city smoke. You lean against the crumbled ledge of a chimney, not one that needs your help, just a perch with a view. The air smells like yesterday's bread, cold soot, and something hopeful. It's a new day, technically, but for you, it's the tail end of a long, slow exhale. Down below, Athens yawns itself awake. Roosters take their jobs very seriously, especially the one standing on a thatched roof, announcing the hour like he's personally responsible for the sun's commute. A few windows crack open, spilling early light over cobble lanes. Inside a modest stone house, a baker's apprentice stirs, throws back his blanket, and immediately regrets every decision that led to a job requiring sunrise. You smile as he stumbles toward the oven hearth, rubbing sleep from his eyes with one hand and reaching for kindling with the other. You whisper heat into his fingers. The fire starts easier than he expects. He blinks, mutters, "Thanks, whoever," and gets to work. Next door, a mother wakes to the tiny kicks of an infant. She shuffles over to her cooking pot, checks the fire, adds 2 sticks. You catch the spark before it fizzles and coax it into something steady. She sighs with relief and begins to hum. Mainstream historical fact. In ancient Greece, it was considered sacrilegious to let a family hearth go cold. Entire communities would relight extinguished home, fires using embers from the central public hearth, often tended by a priestess or elder woman who acted, whether officially or not, as a stand-in for you. You pass through a cluster of homes sharing a communal hearth. More common in poorer districts where space and resources pressed everyone close. There's something intimate here, something that feels more you than all the polished temples combined. An elderly man sets a pot of lentils over the flame and settles beside it, stretching out a hand to feel the warmth. His joints creak like old door hinges. You press the heat just enough to ease the ache. He doesn't say a word, just smiles and closes his eyes. A flock of doves wheels past the Acropolis. You drift with them for a moment, letting the wind do the work. It's nice to glide, especially after a night of tending dozens, maybe hundreds, of flames. Your legs don't get sore, but your soul, even divinity, needs a good stretch. Historians still argue whether your influence faded naturally or was pushed aside by louder, flashier gods. Gods who threw lightning bolts and wore drama like perfume. You never needed to be the center of attention. You just wanted to make sure everyone had somewhere warm to return to. In a fancy villa near the river, a spoiled noble tosses a robe over his shoulder and calls for breakfast like he invented hunger. His hearth has been maintained by servants since before he was born. He doesn't notice you at all. That's fine. You don't do this for recognition. But in a small shrine carved into a garden wall, someone's left you an offering. A few almonds, some wine, a tiny loaf of honey bread. Not much, but intentional. The note tucked beneath the dish reads, "For the warmth that came when I had none." You read it twice. That's the kind of offering that doesn't burn away. Quirky tidbit. One rare fragment of a now-lost scroll claims that the goddess Hestia once gave up her seat among the Olympians to avoid the squabbling and sit closer to the mortal world. Scholars debate its validity, but if true, it might explain why you're never depicted in the thick of divine drama, just always nearby, always watching. You cross the agora slowly. Market stalls begin to open. Some early risers arranging figs and onions, others still asleep with their heads on crates. You pass through them like mist. You feel the soft scuff of sandals. A boy, maybe 12, sneaks into a closed stall and pulls out a bruised pomegranate. He hesitates, looks around, then leaves 2 small pebbles on the crate, his version of payment. Perhaps the only one he can offer. You say nothing, but as he rounds a corner, a baker drops an extra roll in his path. Just coincidence, maybe, but he picks it up with wide eyes. You keep walking. You arrive at a house you've been visiting for years. The residents never saw you, but they always lit the hearth with a whispered greeting. "Good morning, Lady Flame." Today, no one lights it. You step inside. The house is quiet, not abandoned. There are signs of life. A shawl tossed on a chair, a cup left half full. But no fire, no footsteps. You find a daughter kneeling beside a bed, head bowed. Her father lies still beneath the covers. You kneel beside her. Place your hand, light as breath, over hers. The hearth beside them is cold, the ashes gray. You relight it anyway, not because he needs it, but because she does. And when she looks up and sees the flame, her shoulders shake, just once. Then she leans forward and places her hand near it. She doesn't know why, but she whispers, "Thank you." You nod, not that she sees. The sun has fully risen now. The day is alive with its usual buzz, measured, bustling, inevitable. You walk through dreams, disasters, and dowie miracles. You've kept the lonely warm and helped the frightened sleep. You've been ignored, misremembered, and misnamed, but you've never been irrelevant, and you never will be, because as long as there's one flame left, one spark in the dark corner of a quiet room, there you'll be, watching, listening, waiting, and now you settle. The world has reawakened, but you don't need to move anymore. Let the breath in your chest come easy, the weight in your limbs soften. There's no rush now, no one pulling at your robe or calling your name. The fires you tended glow on without you. You've done enough, more than enough. Feel the quiet pull of comfort, like heavy blankets on a cold morning or the hush of snowfall against a window pane. The kind of stillness that doesn't ask anything from you. You've been everywhere tonight. Watch people love, lose, laugh, and light candles just to remember someone's name. You've seen grief fold itself into routine and hope rise with a yawn. And through it all, you stayed steady. Steady like flame. Let that steadiness wrap around you now. Let it smooth the corners of your mind and lull the edges of your thoughts. Nothing to tend right now. No hearth to clean. No one needs you this very second. Just breathe. The city rests, the stars fade, and the last fire dims to an ember. Sleep now, easy and deep. And if in your dream you feel the soft warmth of a fire against your cheek, maybe it's her, maybe it's Hestia, tucking you in.